The bullet missed my head by just an inch. One more step forward, and I wouldn't be telling you this story. Maybe that's the only reason I'm still here, to tell it. To make damn sure someone hears it. Someone like you. You ever work your whole life just to come back home and find it ain't home anymore? That's where it started. That's what I thought. Standing there, face in the dirt, heart pounding like I just jumped out of a plane, staring down the twisted silhouette of a man I once thought was just a nuisance. Jim Benson, HOA president, dressed in khakis and rage, pointing a rifle at me like I was a threat to his world, like I was the invader, like I was the one who didn't belong. I want you to understand something right from the start. I didn't come looking for a fight. I didn't return to Texas to pick a battle with a homeowners association or get tangled up in some backwoods feud. I came back to take care of what my uncle left behind. 15 acres of honest dirt, weathered fences, and a barn full of tools that still smelled like grease and hay and summer sweat. My name's Blake Whitaker, 42, retired Army mechanic, divorced, worn out in all the ways that don't show in photographs. When Uncle Charles passed, he left the ranch to me. The old man had no kids, just cows and stories and neighbors who used to show up with beer and ribs every Sunday. I loved that ranch. I grew up running through those pastures, learning how to change out a tractor belt, how to shoot straight, how to patch up a pipe with duct tape and a prayer. That land wasn't just property. It was bloodline, memory. It was peace. But peace, I learned, doesn't last long when there's an HOA down the road. Now, you might already be shaking your head. Maybe you've dealt with them yourself. Letters in the mailbox, fines for mailbox paint, passive-aggressive threats wrapped in legalese. I thought I knew the type. I was wrong. I wasn't dealing with a nuisance. I was dealing with a man who saw power like it was God's gift to him. Jim Benson didn't just believe in rules. He believed he was the rule. When I first moved in, I didn't think much of the HOA. My uncle's land was technically outside their jurisdiction, grandfathered in before they expanded their reach. I figured that was that. But Jim? He had other ideas. To him, I was a loose end, a threat to order, a stain on his little suburban empire. The first time I fired my old hunting rifle, just a couple test shots on a target behind a woodpile at the back of the ranch. I heard about it the next morning. Typed letter taped to my front gate. Cease use of firearms on HOA-adjacent property. Immediate compliance required. Signed, Jim Benson, HOA president. I laughed, thought it was a joke, crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. I followed every law, had my own land, set up the range safely, checked with the sheriff beforehand. No harm done. But Jim didn't laugh. 2 days later, I caught him skulking along my fence line, camera in hand, snapping photos like I was building a meth lab. Private property, I told him, calmly, directly. You're not welcome here. He just smirked. You'll learn, Blake. You can't just do whatever you want out here. This is a community. No threat, no shout, just quiet menace, oozing out from behind mirrored sunglasses and khaki arrogance. So I did what the Army taught me. Document everything. I installed cameras, kept a journal. Not because I wanted drama, but because I knew the smell of power when it turned sour. Jim didn't want safety. He wanted control. And then the real harassment started. Mailbox smashed. Garden hose slashed. Camera wires cut. Always at night. Always just enough to make me question my own sanity. But I didn't break. Hell, I even brought the man a peace offering basket of apples, letter of respect. Told him I wanted neighborly peace. He never answered, never even acknowledged it. Then one morning, Travis came over, Marine buddy, good man, teaches gun safety at the local VFW. We were in the back shed with dummy rounds, just cleaning and doing disassembly drills. No shots, no noise, no danger. Yet somehow, within the hour, a patrol cruiser rolled in. Young deputy stepped out, firm but polite. Got a call, he said. Live rounds. Public safety concern. I showed him the tools, the manuals, the dummy shells. He saw the truth, said we were good, left. But something changed in me that day. I realized Jim wasn't just petty. He was calculating. He was building a case, brick by brick, hoping I'd slip. hoping I'd snap, hoping I'd give him the opening he needed to ruin me. So I stopped using the range, tightened security, played everything by the book. But men like Jim, they don't want you playing fair. They want you on your knees. It was just before dawn when I fired 2 warning shots into the air. Coyotes had crept too close to the livestock. No injuries, no damage, just noise to keep the animals safe. That's all it took. Next morning, I stepped out with my coffee and saw Jim's truck parked near my front gate. He wasn't alone this time. He was armed, rifle in hand, eyes wild. "You're finished, Blake," he shouted. "This ends today." I thought it was bluff, a scare tactic, until I saw the barrel rise. Then came the crack. Not from my gun, from his. The shot missed by inches. My mug shattered. My ears rang. I dropped to the dirt behind a fence post, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out. That's where you found me at the start of this story. Not a war zone, not Afghanistan, not Fallujah, but my own backyard. And maybe that's what broke something in me. Not the gunfire, not the trespass, but the realization that even here, even after all the years I spent serving this country, trying to come home, I was under attack by the very people who called themselves patriots. The sirens were faint then, growing louder. But in that moment, all I could think was, how many men like Jim are out there? How many use the law like a weapon, community like a shield, rules like a trap? And what happens when we stop fighting back? You see, this story ain't just about me. It's about you. It's about every man who ever wanted peace and found war waiting with a clipboard and a smile. It's about every inch of land bought with sweat, every fence post dug with calloused hands, every family heirloom passed down only to be threatened by paper tyrants in pressed shirts. I'm telling you this not for sympathy, but because you need to know what's coming. Because if they haven't come for you yet, they will. So when they do, you better be ready. Because I wasn't, but I damn well am now. When the sirens finally tore through the morning stillness, I was still crouched behind the fence post, dirt in my mouth, heart hammering like a piston. The air felt thicker than it should have, like the ground itself was holding its breath. I stood up slowly, hands raised, not because I was guilty, but because I've been around long enough to know how quickly a misunderstanding can get you killed, especially when the other guy's the one holding the narrative and the rifle. Jim Benson lowered his weapon the second he saw the flashing lights crest the hill. Just like that, the wild look in his eyes shifted into something familiar, phony innocence. The kind you see in a man who's rehearsed the lie before telling it. He even gave a little wave to the deputies like he was welcoming them to a barbecue. The patrol cars rolled to a stop. One of them was Daniels, the same deputy who'd visited weeks earlier during the dummy round misunderstanding. That small detail saved my life. Daniels had seen the setup. He knew I wasn't the lunatic Jim was painting me to be. But that didn't stop procedure. Guns drawn, voices sharp. Hands where we can see 'em. I did as told, shouted that I was the property owner, unarmed, and that Jim had fired first. Jim, of course, spun his story like a politician on trial. That he came to talk, that I lost it, that I threatened him, that he feared for his life. Lies, all of it. But lies spoken with calmness are dangerous. They settle into people's minds like seeds. It wasn't until Daniels reviewed the footage from my front gate camera that things shifted. That tiny black box, wired directly to a cloud server, had caught the whole thing. Jim stepping onto my land with a weapon, shouting, raising the rifle and firing. No editing. No commentary. Just the truth. Daniels confiscated both our rifles and told us not to contact each other while the investigation unfolded. I knew what that meant. It meant they weren't ready to act. Not yet. They wanted everything airtight, no loopholes, no lawyer-slick defense twisting this around. I got that. But knowing Jim walked away in the back seat of a patrol car without cuffs while I stood in the ashes of my morning peace, it lit something in me. The next 24 hours were a blur. I double-checked my security feeds, saved the footage in 5 separate drives, mailed copies to my lawyer, Travis, even my cousin in Austin who works in IT. I wasn't just protecting my ranch anymore. I was building a case. Jim wasn't backing down. That night, I got an email from the county zoning office. Subject line: Noise complaint and permit violation, immediate response required. It was official now. He'd filed a formal complaint accusing me of running an unlicensed firearms training facility. He submitted witness testimony, fuzzy screenshots, and even an audio clip from the night I scared off the coyotes. He wasn't just trying to punish me, he was trying to erase me, make me look like a public threat. The kind of man people whisper about at HOA meetings and church potlucks. A headline waiting to happen. The next morning, a surveyor showed up with a clipboard and measuring tape, walking along the western edge of my ranch like he owned it. Said he was hired by the HOA. Told me they were planning a community walking path, and that my property was pending integration into the neighborhood greenbelt. Integration? Like this was some city annex and not the damn ranch my uncle bled for? I showed him the deed. My name, my property lines. He nodded, shuffled his papers, and walked off without a word. But I knew then this wasn't just about noise or guns. This was a takeover. Quiet, legal, surgical. The kind of land grab you don't see until it's too late. That night I called Travis. Told him to bring the drone. The one with thermal vision and night cam. We launched it just before midnight, flying it along the fence line. We picked up movement almost immediately. 2 figures marking out the area with wooden stakes and colored ribbons. One of them was Jim. The other was Mike Reeves, the HOA treasurer, and a man I'd shared beers with 5 years ago at the county fair. Betrayal feels different when it comes from a man you once helped pull out of a ditch after a flood. They were laughing, measuring, planning. We got it all on film. And then we waited. I printed out every frame, stored it in a folder marked HOA trespass evidence, and gave a copy to my attorney, Hannah. She's the kind of woman who makes judges nervous. Sharp eyes, steel voice, no tolerance for bullshit. She told me we had enough to press charges, but I said no, not yet. I wanted them to go deeper. I wanted them to feel untouchable. That's when they get sloppy. And sure enough, they did. 2 nights later, I caught 2 men in hoodies on the south edge of my property snapping photos of a cut fence and whispering about staging a broken water line to trigger county code enforcement. I chased them off. Didn't catch him, but got clear photos. Sent them to Daniels. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. They're escalating, he said. But you can't retaliate. I told him I wasn't interested in vengeance. I was interested in winning. But what came next? That wasn't a game. 3:04 a.m., I woke to smoke. Thick, black, chemical. The barn was on fire. Flames danced against the sky like they were celebrating. I grabbed Buddy, my old lab who'd been with me longer than my marriage lasted, and we ran out. The livestock were still inside. I kicked the door down, flames licking the rafters, smoke pouring into my eyes like acid. I saved them barely. 3 goats, 2 sheep, a stubborn cow named Daisy. We all made it out as the barn collapsed behind us. Hose was slashed. Backup water tank had been drained. This wasn't nature. This was intent. Arson. Daniels showed up as the sun broke over the ridge, holding a burned-out gas can they found near the door. Accelerant. Entry forced. We're pulling the state in now. He looked me in the eye and said the words that hit harder than any gunshot. This isn't about rules anymore. This is personal. That was the moment I stopped playing defense. That was the moment I realized I couldn't just out-document these bastards. I had to outmaneuver them. They weren't just coming for my land. They were coming for my legacy. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Hannah and said 5 words she wasn't expecting. I want to buy it. She blinked. Buy what? The land they need. The one they're trying to rezone into that fake greenbelt. I want to own it before they do. Within a week, I had it under contract. Turns out the lot was technically still owned by an out-of-state developer who had no idea what was happening on the ground. I used every dollar I had left in savings. But when the ink dried and the deed showed my name, I knew I'd won the first real battle. I emailed Jim a scanned copy of the title with 1 sentence underneath. This land is now private. Trespassers will be prosecuted. They didn't reply, but 2 days later, someone spray-painted my front gate in thick red letters. You think this is over? And standing there in the early morning haze, I realized what many men have learned too late. That when you stand your ground, the ground itself becomes a battlefield. That when you refuse to bend, they will come not just for your property, but for your peace. But I wasn't bending. Not now. Not ever. And I sure as hell wasn't finished. I didn't sleep much after the fire. The smell of burnt timber lingered on everything. My clothes, my porch, even in the hair of my old dog, Buddy, who stuck to me like a shadow. I sat up most nights with my rifle across my lap, ears twitching at every creak, every gust of wind that sounded a little too intentional. Something changes in a man after someone tries to burn his history to the ground. You start looking at every shadow like it's hiding teeth. But I wasn't scared. I was angry. There's a difference. Fear makes you run. Anger makes you plan. And I was planning. 3 nights after the fire, I got another visit. Not from Jim Benson this time, but from something more cunning silence. The patrol unit that was supposed to be parked outside my ranch never showed. I waited until 10, then 11. By midnight, I knew something wasn't right. I called Daniels, straight to voicemail. Tried the sheriff's dispatch. Same thing. It felt off. Too clean. Too quiet. So I grabbed my coat, my rifle, and Buddy, and we stepped outside into the dark like ghosts on patrol. The moon was high, painting silver across scorched grass and half-burnt boards. I had floodlights and sensors, but I didn't turn them on. I didn't want to scare off whatever was coming. I wanted to catch it. That's when I heard it. The crunch of gravel by the barn ruins. I ducked behind the trough, motioned Buddy down, and peered through the scope. 3 figures. Hooded. Moving with purpose. One had a gas can. Another carried a crowbar. The third? Something bulkier, slung over his shoulder. I didn't wait to find out what. I fired a warning shot into the sky and shouted, "Step away from the truck. You're on private property." Armed and monitored. They froze, and for half a second, I thought they might drop their gear and run. But then one of them moved, fast, toward the truck, and tripped a wire I'd rigged earlier that day. Empty cans rattled. A flare popped, and Buddy launched forward with a bark so fierce it could peel paint. One of them went down, tangled in wire and wet grass. I ran in, pinned him with a knee, yanked off his mask, and nearly choked on my breath. It was Mike Reeves, Jim's treasurer, the same man who had measured my land with that smug look weeks ago. He was breathing hard, eyes wide and wild, like he couldn't believe I'd caught him. "You think you're saving something?" he hissed. "You think you're a hero?" I didn't answer. The others had vanished into the tree line, but I didn't care. I had what I needed. Daniels finally showed up 20 minutes later, lights off, face pale. He pulled me aside while the other deputies cuffed Mike and bagged his tools. "We found out what happened," he said quietly. "Someone bribed a rookie deputy to reroute the patrol schedule. That's why no one showed up." I nodded once. I was past shock. "You ready to push this further?" Daniels asked. "We're not talking HOA policy anymore. This is conspiracy. Attempted arson. Possibly attempted homicide." I didn't even blink. "Push it all the way," I said. The fallout was fast. A search of Mike's vehicle revealed more than I could have imagined. Maps of my ranch, notes detailing my daily routines, a list of suppliers I used, and a burner phone full of texts between him and someone labeled JB. It wasn't hard to guess who that was. But the worst part? Zip ties, lighter fluid, a loaded .22 pistol. This wasn't scare tactics anymore. This was preparation for something much darker. Daniels filed a request with the state. Within days, a joint task force was looking into the HOA's financials, security logs, board meeting transcripts, and property acquisition documents. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. Funds misused, threats documented, complaints ignored, and at the center of it all, Jim Benson. Turns out my story wasn't unique. 3 other neighbors had filed anonymous complaints over the last 2 years, but every one of them was quietly settled, buried, or lost. One man, a retired welder down the road, had moved out altogether after Jim, accidentally bulldozed part of his fence and let his horses loose. But no one had ever fought back. Until now. When Jim got word that Mike had been arrested, he panicked. That's the thing about men who hide behind fake authority. They only know how to bark when they feel safe. Take away the walls, the robes, the titles, and all you're left with is a coward with a clipboard. I heard Jim tried to leave the county. Didn't get far. Daniels and 2 deputies picked him up just outside town. Sitting in a borrowed SUV with his gun tucked under the seat and a duffel bag full of HOA documents he tried to destroy. He went without a fight. But that wasn't the end. The HOA tried to recover. A new interim board was announced, led by a slick-talking woman named Cheryl Haynes, who used phrases like community integrity and long-term vision. She sent me a letter 2 days after Jim's arrest, claiming that the HOA would continue its plans for the Greenbelt Trail and reminding me that individual resistance undermines collective progress. I laughed out loud when I read that. Then I handed it to Hannah. We filed a formal motion to dissolve the entire board under a clause in their own charter, Section 9.4, stating that any board found complicit in criminal actions could be voted out with a simple majority. But we didn't stop there. We went public. Travis cut a video using footage from my cameras, the drone, the body cams from Mike's arrest, and overlaid it with my voice, calm and cold. This is what HOA abuse looks like. And this is what happens when someone fights back. We posted it to every local forum, every Facebook group, even got it on a veterans advocacy site. It spread like a fire in dry grass. Within 48 hours, it had 30,000 views. By the end of the week, over 100,000. People started sharing their own HOA horror stories. A woman in Arizona whose HOA threatened to fine her $500 a day for flying a U.S. flag. A Vietnam vet in Florida who was ordered to remove his service dog's ramp because it didn't meet aesthetic guidelines. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was a movement. The emergency vote happened on a Friday night. The local community gym was packed. Standing room only. Some people were angry. Others were scared. But most were just tired. Tired of fear dressed up as regulation. Tired of power without accountability. When the votes were counted, the verdict was clear. The board was gone. Dissolved. Permanently. HOA authority suspended pending full audit. I stepped outside after the vote, Buddy by my side, and stood at the edge of the parking lot looking up at the sky. I should have felt victorious. But instead I felt still. Like something had ended, sure. But something else had just begun. Because men like Jim aren't the disease. They're the symptom. The real sickness is silence. The belief that if you keep your head down, they'll leave you alone. But they won't. They never do. That's why I started the Rancher Network. A group of men and women, mostly older folks, mostly quiet, mostly overlooked, who've been bullied, fined, manipulated, and gaslit by HOA systems that forgot who the hell they're supposed to serve. We meet monthly. Share stories. Share resources. Share lawyers. It's not just a group, it's armor. And now we've got members in 3 counties and counting. Because this land, this country, it wasn't built by people who played nice. It was built by people who stood their ground, who held the line, who didn't blink when someone tried to take what they'd earned. And if that sounds familiar to you, if something in your gut twists when you hear this, then maybe, just maybe, you're not done fighting either. Maybe you're just getting started. Like I was. The thing they never tell you about winning a war, especially one fought in your own backyard, is that it doesn't end with a signature or a vote or a gavel bang. It ends in whispers, in letters without stamps, in shadows moving where they shouldn't be. And sometimes it doesn't end at all. 2 weeks after the HOA board was dissolved, I thought the fight was finally over. My barn was halfway rebuilt thanks to volunteers. The community had rallied like family, and the Rancher Network was growing strong. We were making a dent, hell, we were making a crater in the way local power abused the quiet. But just when I let my guard down, the devil knocked again. It was a Sunday. Quiet. The kind of Texas quiet that makes you feel like the land is holding its breath. I just poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and was walking out to the porch when I saw it. Red spray paint slashed across my new front gate. You think this is over? I didn't need a signature. The words said enough. I called Daniels immediately. He arrived fast, looked at the paint, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "They're not done," I said. He nodded. "We'll start patrols again. But Blake, you should be ready for anything." He didn't have to say more. I already was. That night, Travis and I pulled another all-nighter. We doubled the sensors, added floodlights in the back pasture, swapped out the old trail cams for infrared ones, and rigged makeshift alarms out of wire and scrap metal. We even set up scheduled drone flights every few nights just to cover blind spots. But security was just the surface. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I posted a video that same night, standing in front of the ruined barn, wind cutting cold across my face. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just looked into the lens and said, "To whoever keeps coming for me, spray painting threats, setting fires, aiming weapons, you had your chance. I didn't start this fight, but I'm going to finish it. Not with fear, with truth. You're not just messing with me. You're messing with the law. And the law is watching." That video went viral. Again, veterans, farmers, truckers, old ranchers from across the country commented. They'd seen this before. HOA boards turning towns into prisons with lawns for bars. "You're speaking for all of us, Blake." One guy wrote from Alabama. "Give him hell." I planned to, but it wasn't the video that drew blood. It was what happened 2 nights later. Around midnight, the patrol car that was supposed to be parked by my fence line, nowhere in sight. Again, I called Daniel's voicemail, called the station. No answer. Something wasn't right. So I waited, rifle in hand, buddy by my side, ears twitching, breath slow. Then snap. A branch maybe 10 yards from the barn wreckage. I flicked on the floodlight, and there they were. 3 masked men crouched behind my truck. One with a gas can, another with a crowbar. The third, this one, held a map. They scattered as soon as I fired into the air. But I'd set trip wires this time. One of them hit it and face-planted into the dirt. Buddy pounced, barking like hell's fury. I pinned him down, yanked off his mask, and there he was, Mike Reeves. Again, eyes wild, spitting mad. "You don't get it," he hissed. "You destroyed everything." Before I could answer, backup arrived. Turns out Daniels had found out that someone inside the department had rerouted the patrol. Again, Jim's influence was still reaching from his jail cell. Daniels was furious. The man nearly tore the cruiser door off its hinges when they threw Mike in. And in Mike's backpack? Zip ties, lighter fluid, a loaded .22 pistol. The map marked 3 points on my property. They weren't just trying to vandalize. They were planning something permanent. That night changed everything. It wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It wasn't even about the HOA. This was a network, a web of old loyalties, old grudges, and a dangerous willingness to turn community control into personal power. So we did what they didn't expect. We turned their own tools against them. We gathered every piece of data, drone footage, gate cam videos, messages, even voice memos, and built a timeline. Then we shared it, not just online. We sent packets to state reps, to the DA, to journalists, and it worked. Within a week, a federal investigation was launched into the HOA's financial records, property disputes, and code enforcement practices. Turns out Jim had buddies in other counties doing the same thing, threatening landowners, doctoring zoning reports, even forging easements. But the scariest part? We found a group chat buried in Mike's phone labeled Clean Sweep. Members from multiple HOA boards across the state were in it, sharing tactics for how to force landowners into compliance or foreclosure. Their favorite trick: filing false complaints to trigger inspections, then charging violations for every missing permit, cracked brick, or faded fence post. You could feel the rage ripple through the rancher network. This wasn't just a Texas thing. This was systemic. That realization lit a fire we couldn't put out. We started filing class action claims. Dozens of them. Lawyers came forward offering pro bono help. Senators started paying attention. I got calls from people in Idaho, Kentucky, California, asking how to start their own network. One guy in Nevada even printed shirts. Still Standing Rancher Network. But while the world was catching up, the danger got personal. One night, Travis came back from town and found a note under his windshield wiper. He's not the only one with a barn. His place was untouched. But we knew the message. They were widening the battlefield. The next morning, I found Buddy limping. Someone had tossed glass shards into his water bowl. My hands shook with rage. I called Daniels again. "This isn't just trespassing," I said. "This is war." And he agreed. We got the state involved. Cameras, patrols, surveillance, and finally we got names. The last straw came when a neighbor named Paul, a retired Navy vet, found his irrigation line dug up and replaced with a contaminated pipe. Poisoned half his crops. Nearly cost him the farm. And guess who was seen walking his dog nearby that week? The former HOA secretary. That's when the indictments started dropping. Jim Benson. Conspiracy, attempted arson, obstruction, and more. Mike Reeves. Aggravated trespassing, attempted assault. The HOA? Officially dissolved across 4 counties. And I testified in court, looked Jim straight in the eyes and told the jury what he'd done, what he tried to do. Not just to me, but to every quiet man who ever just wanted to live in peace. The jury didn't even take 3 hours. Guilty. Jim got 12 years. Mike got 7. And the rest? Faded like shadows at dawn. But still, I didn't feel peace. Because peace, I realized, isn't a thing you win. It's a thing you protect. Every damn day. So I rebuilt the barn. Repaired the fences. And every morning now, I sit on the porch with Buddy at my feet, coffee in hand, scanning the horizon. Not in fear, in watchfulness. Because they might come again. Or someone else might. But I'll be ready. And I hope to hell you are too. Because what happened here, it's not just my story. It's yours. It's every man who's been told to sit down, shut up, and sign the fine. Every neighbor who's been threatened with codes and citations for living like his father did. Every vet who traded a uniform for land, only to be told he couldn't fly his own flag. We're not alone anymore. We're linked. Ranch to ranch. Fence to fence. Story to story. And the next time they come for one of us, they'll find all of us waiting, still standing, still free, and never backing down. It began with a quiet morning. The kind that should have felt peaceful, almost sacred, sunlight sliding through the trees like melted gold. Dew still clinging to the tall grass. Buddy's tail thumping gently against the porch boards while I drank my coffee. But peace, real peace, doesn't come easy to a man who's been hunted on his own land. I'd survived fire, bullets, trespass, and betrayal. I'd testified in court, brought down the corrupt, helped dissolve an entire HOA structure that had rotted through like an old fence post. But deep down, I knew something was still out there, lingering in the air like the smell of smoke long after the flames had died. And it came in the form of an envelope. No name, no stamp, just wedged under my front door like a knife waiting to be picked up. Inside were more photos, dozens. Me feeding the livestock, walking with Buddy, fixing the irrigation pipe by the west line. Some taken at night, some from the woods. Whoever sent them had been watching me for weeks. Tucked at the bottom was a single handwritten line. "You humiliated the wrong people." I felt my jaw tighten, the old instincts kicking back in. Not fear. Readiness. A man can only be ambushed so many times before he starts waking up with one eye open. I called Daniels. Again. He showed up in under an hour, stared at the photos with the kind of silent fury only lawmen and old soldiers understand. "We'll reopen surveillance. No questions," he said. But we both knew this wasn't about retribution anymore. It was about endurance. These weren't just goons or HOA loyalists who missed their power. This was a cult of control. An ideology dressed up as civic duty, still slithering in the grass even after the head had been cut. That night, Travis and I took shifts watching the perimeter. The new cameras we'd installed had facial recognition and long-range infrared. But more than that, we'd upgraded the drone fleet, 2 quiet flyers with night vision and motion tracking, cycling between preset flight paths. We weren't just recording now. We were hunting. Days passed. Then a week. Quiet. maybe too quiet. Then came the fire in the north field. Someone lit a pile of hay bales just before dawn, timed perfectly to when the dew had burned off and the wind started picking up. I caught it early, managed to douse it with the new backup tank before it spread. But whoever did it knew the layout, knew the blind spots. I circled the area twice, boots crunching blackened grass, until I spotted the tire tracks. 2 sets, narrow, TV most likely, one fresh, one older. I radioed Travis. "They're mapping us again," I said. "Learning." He didn't even pause. "Then let's teach them a lesson." That night we ran a new operation. Fake weak points, barrels left exposed, lights shut off at certain corners, trail cams placed low while new ones were hidden high. Bait. Sure enough, it worked. At 2:13 a.m., the west camera picked up a pair of figures slinking through the trees, stepping carefully through the gate where we deliberately disabled the motion alarm. They moved quick, practiced. One had a long object slung over his shoulder, probably a bolt cutter. The other held a phone, scanning like he was recording. We let them get 10 feet in. Then we triggered the trap. Floodlights blazed. The drone kicked into tracking mode and started broadcasting live. Travis's voice boomed through the speaker mounted under the eaves. "You're trespassing on private property. Authorities are en route. Lay down your tools and walk out with your hands up." One froze. The other ran. But this time we were ready. I was already waiting at the ridge. Caught the runner mid-sprint. Pulled the mask off. And I'll be damned if it wasn't one of the former HOA subcommittee heads. The same guy who'd once tried to fine a woman down the road for painting her mailbox the wrong shade of green. The next morning, after Daniels hauled them both in, we made another move. We went to the county council. This time, we didn't come with just stories. We came with data, footage, satellite overlays, recorded threats, witness testimony. We told them point blank. This wasn't just HOA abuse. It was systemic harassment using pseudo-legal mechanisms to control private citizens. And then we told them what we were building. The rancher network wasn't just a few folks swapping lawyer names anymore. We had over 600 members across 5 counties. A legal defense fund. A secure platform for whistleblowers. Volunteer patrol teams. We weren't protesting. We were organizing. And the politicians? They started listening. One senator from Austin even came down to the ranch. Wore boots too clean to be trusted, but he listened. Really listened. Asked questions. Took notes. "You've started something," he said, looking out at the land. "I don't think it's going to stop here." I didn't answer. I just nodded, because I knew he was right. But change like this, it doesn't come clean. It doesn't come quick. And it sure as hell doesn't come without more fight. A week later, I got a call from a woman named Carla down in Travis County. Said her dad, a retired Vietnam vet, had been fined almost $12,000 by his HOA for non-compliant roofing materials. Said they sent him notices every month until he gave up and moved into a trailer on the edge of town. She cried on the phone. Said he felt like he'd been pushed off his own land. That broke something in me. So we launched the first Rancher Defense Roadshow. We loaded up a flatbed with gear, documents, drone kits, trail cams, and a screen showing footage from my property. We drove from town to town holding meetings at local granges and veteran halls. And men came, dozens, hundreds, farmers, mechanics, teachers, truckers, older men with hands like rope and backs bowed from decades of work. They listened, they asked, and then they stood. "Enough's enough," one said. "We built this damn country. We should be allowed to live in it." I couldn't have said it better. Back at home, we kept building. The barn was done. The east fence was reinforced. I added a new gate, steel, laser cut with the words, "Still standing," right across the arch. I carved Buddy's name beneath it in case one day he wasn't there to guard it himself. But the strangest thing? The quieter it got, the more the fear changed. It wasn't gone. It had just shifted, became the kind of tension you feel when you're winning a battle you never wanted to fight. A few former HOA folks tried to reach out. Letters, emails. One even left a note on my gate. "We were just trying to protect the community." I didn't respond. because I wasn't interested in apologies soaked in excuses. I didn't burn their barns. I didn't lie about their deeds. I didn't try to jail them for fixing a fence or scaring off coyotes. They crossed the line and they paid for it. And if they ever come back, they'll find that line is now etched in stone. We don't bend anymore. We stand. And when I think about what comes next, I think about that old saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. But out here we flipped it. We prepared for war and we earned peace. Not just for me. For everyone tired of watching the quiet be trampled by those drunk on control. One morning, I stood at the gate again, looked out over the land, the cows, the fields, the scars, and I carved one last word beneath Buddy's name. Legacy. Because that's what this has become. Not just a fight, not just a win, but a way forward. A path for anyone who dares to say, this land is mine, this peace is mine, and I will protect it, come hell or high water. So if you're out there listening, maybe in a small town in Georgia or a farmhouse in Montana or a ranch in the Arizona dust, know this, you are not alone. The quiet ones are awake now, and we're standing, all of us, together,